further inquiries. What I can say to Ms Graham and to anyone else, the Scottish Government will fully cooperate in any way to make sure, as I say, we can answer questions. But it is for others to decide. Our rules are restricted to the jurisdiction of our land, and our powers are restricted by the limited powers of this current devolved Parliament.
Duncan McNeill, followed by Margaret MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am sure the Justice Secretary will be well aware and recognises that his decision in regard to Mr Megrahi has sadly resulted in widespread criticism and threat of boycott, a situation that could seriously deteriorate if a planned visit by the Scottish Government to the Middle East seeking investment funds for public projects here in Scotland goes ahead. Does the Justice Secretary agree that such a visit would not be well understood or appropriate at this current time, and that such a visit should be ruled out to avoid further damage to Scotland's reputation?
Cabinet Secretary.
I have to say I am not aware of any such visit, and we will do nothing as a government to damage Scotland's interests, whether in the Middle East or anywhere else. But I would simply say that, you may disagree with my decision, but can I just simply refer you to the view of your former colleague Tam Dalyell, who said that Mr MacAskill, the Justice Minister, has arrived at the right decision on compassionate grounds.
Margaret MacDonald, followed by Ian McKee.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the Cabinet Secretary say what he said to Mr Megrahi in his prison cell, what he said back in return to the Cabinet Secretary, and will he say whether or not he has made any effort to discover from Mr Al Megrahi's counsel why he believed that he would enhance his chances of returning to Libya if he gave up his appeal?
Cabinet Secretary.
I made no such reference to Mr Al Megrahi, Mr Al Megrahi's counsel, who I should say I have never met, or indeed Mr Al Megrahi's solicitor, who was with him throughout the meeting. No such, as I say, suggestion was ever made. It would have been entirely inappropriate. I said at the outset of this matter that it would be following due process and proper guidance, and I made it quite clear that his appeal was a matter for him and the courts. He made his decision without any interference from myself.
Ian McKee and then Margaret Curran.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The future lifespan for people diagnosed as having prostate cancer can vary from a few months to many years, and the condition can vary in severity from causing extreme handicap to being compatible with living an almost normal life. Can the Cabinet Secretary detail the advice he received on Mr Megrahi's prognosis and the prospect for treatment of his cancer?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Dr McKee is better qualified in medical matters than myself, but I can say that the medical report has been provided at the request of the United States Government to them, and indeed has been made much more widely available. Clearly, it is quite clear from the evidence contained within there, not simply from the Director of Health and Social Care at the Scottish Prison Service, but indeed the consultants and other experts who dealt with Mr Al Megrahi's situation and treatment prior to, during and after that he is terminally ill. That, as I say, is a matter of record. It is a matter, as I say, that may see him live longer or shorter, but the information was, the prognosis was terminal, that a 3-month timescale had thereafter been reached, and it was on that basis that I made my decision.
Margaret Curran, followed by John Lamont.
Thank you. Does the Cabinet Secretary recognise, for those of us who genuinely take a different view and believe he made a grave error of judgment, that somehow we all lack compassion is deeply offensive? Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if he specifically asked his officials to investigate the details of compassionate alternatives in Scotland? What did the Cabinet Secretary specifically ask his officials to investigate in terms of those compassionate alternatives? What were the results, and will he publish the full details of this?
Cabinet Secretary.
We spoke to the Deputy Chief Constable of Strathclyde. He is the man in charge of operational guidance. He is the advice that we have to accept. I do not believe that I should ever seek to interfere with those operational matters that are within the domain of the police. It may be that Annabel Goldie and Margaret Curran do believe that a hospice should have been made available in Scotland. I believe that the hospices that we have in Scotland are entitled to be treated with the dignity and sanctitude that they are entitled to, and that they should not have placed upon them the encumbrance of numerous police officers, never mind the entourage that would have followed. Our people have their own opportunity to die in dignity and comfort.
John Lamont, followed by Jim Hume.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary has told the Chamber that the views of the UK Government were sought in relation to the prisoner transfer agreement. To assist our understanding of the decision-making process in relation to the compassionate release order, will the Cabinet Secretary ensure that all communications between the Scottish Government and the UK Government will be made public, or alternatively will he confirm there was no such correspondence or communication?
Well, I've said we will be more than happy to produce whatever information we can. We are seeking for others to provide us with their authority to release it, whether they be victims or whether they be national governments. I cannot comment on what they will do or say because I have not heard from them. It will be for them to justify their actions.
Jim Hume, followed by Brian Adam.
Presiding Officer, the people of Lockerbie have long ago made it clear they want to move on from that dreadful night. Unfortunately, this has brought it all to a head for them again. And I understand this is a matter for the Parliament's Bureau and yourself, but I would like to ask the Cabinet Secretary again, will he and his party support the Liberal Democrat call for the release of Mr Al Megrahi to be debated at the earliest opportunity in this chamber to show the world what the true Scottish view on the matter is, rather than this minority government's view, yes or no?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, these are matters, as I said at the very outset, Presiding Officer, that are matters for the Bureau. I do not seek to impose upon them. If that is what is the wish of the Bureau, then clearly I will answer and account for it, as I have appeared to here today. These are matters that we will be more than happy to fully cooperate with.
Brian Adam, followed by Pauline McNeill.
Presiding Officer, I will never forget that particular day, because the very next morning I left with my family on a Pan Am flight out of Heathrow. So the implications of this are very firmly in my own mind. Can the Cabinet Secretary, in relation to the House Newton Mearns, elaborate a little more on the advice he got from the Strathclyde Police, and in particular whether any costs were given to him?
Well, costs are not a factor that we take into account in the implementation of our justice system, and had it been viewed as feasible or operationally appropriate, then clearly we would have been prepared as a government to bear that cost. This was based on the consequences of severe problems that would have been faced by Strathclyde Police in ensuring the safety of Mr Al Megrahi and a variety of other people. There are consequences for those who live in close proximity to him, and as I say, that was a matter that had to be considered by me when we have the suggestions of hospice care. I have to consider the consequences of that decision had I forced Mr Al Megrahi upon a hospice in Scotland that spends a lot of its time gathering hard-earned funds to look after our people in their dying days. I followed the operational advice. It was based on sound operational reasons, not on the diktats of finance.
Pauline McNeill, followed by Sandra White.
Presiding Officer, it is a matter of great regret that the full extent of the criminal justice system was not tested. The Cabinet Secretary has said today that it is not a condition of release that Mr Megrahi had to withdraw from his appeal. Can he offer an explanation then as to why Mr Megrahi himself said, "I am faced with an appalling choice, to risk dying in prison in the hope that my name will be cleared, or to return home still carrying the weight of the guilty verdict"? Can you confirm today, Cabinet Secretary, was it competent for this appeal to have continued, or was it actually an obstacle to his release?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, according to the laws of Scotland, it would be perfectly competent for it to have continued, whether he was abroad, indeed whether he had deceased. That's a matter of fact within the laws of Scotland. But I reiterate to you, Ms McNeill, through the presiding officer, that no pressure was brought to bear upon Mr Al Megrahi, and indeed I refer once again to the Times of London, which I think made it quite clear that Mr Al Megrahi was quite clear in his own mind that no pressure had been brought to bear upon him by the Government of Scotland. He did so because he had been returned home to die.
Sandra White, followed by Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his statement and his decision, which I fully support. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if he agrees with the comments made by Jack McConnell in 2007, who said, "We need someone to preside over the Parliament who embodies the words on the mace: justice, wisdom, compassion and integrity. Each of us should embody these principles every day in carrying out our parliamentary duties."
Cabinet Secretary.
I don't seek to impose my views, my faith, beliefs or values upon anyone. I made this decision following the guidance laid down in the laws of Scotland and what I believed is my interpretation to be the values of Scotland. Many will disagree, as Mr Stephen has made it clear, and indeed Mr McConnell. Equally, I have to say, Presiding Officer, I am heartened by the support that I have received from many people in Scotland, and in particular from both Archbishop Conte and indeed the Reverend Galloway.
Patricia Ferguson, followed by Jackson Connell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In his statement last week and again today, the Justice Secretary stated that he had ruled out a prisoner transfer request in respect of Mr Megrahi. Yet at the time